Media day has come and gone. We finally get to see everyone back in their Kings uniforms. I feel like you kind of have the draft and free agency. Everyone gets all excited, and then there's just such a massive gap between then and when media day and training camp starts. And so, media day, it's kind of that time where it builds that hype back up. You remember why you're excited for the season. And really, media day it really signals the start of the NBA season, I would say. And so that's exciting no matter what, but especially for this Kings team. So let's go through, some of the key takeaways from this media day. We can start up top with Monte McNair and Mike Brown. Mike Brown, always a fun guy to listen to. He's always got something to talk about. And this time it was about bringing in a mountain climber as a guest speaker and comparing mountain climbing with basketball. And so, it's always interesting listening to Mike Brown. He's got this new phrase for the team, climbing together, focusing, on what's in front of you and not just focusing on the summit, but just one step at a time to get to the summit. So I guess that's our phrase for the season, climbing together. But I think the kind of big thing that Mike Brown said is Keon Ellis is playing with the starters in training camp. He talked about wanting to keep Malik off the bench, and I still think it's important him coming out saying, Keon's the guy that's going to be starting. Obviously, I think that makes sense. Keon's still going to have to earn his spot. There's plenty of guys that could come in and take his spot if he doesn't continue to perform at the level that he did last season. But I got faith in him. And it was kind of funny. Someone brought up the log jam at the shooting guard position to Monk, and he was just like, "What log jam?" And so obviously he doesn't see a problem, but he got called a shooting guard. He's like, "I'm not a shooting guard. I'm a guard." And I love that because I've been so annoyed at where people are categorizing him. Like, he really isn't a shooting guard. And you always see him in the shooting guard category. It's like he doesn't play the same role as a guy like Kevin Huerter or Keon Ellis, guys that are like the true shooting guards of the team. He's more of a point guard. And so him just calling himself a guard, maybe that'll make other people stop calling him a shooting guard. Probably won't, but I'm glad he agrees with me on where to, kind of place him. I mean, it's kind of like why I have a spreadsheet with the Kings roster. I categorize him under guard. I don't have him in the shooting guard category. Going back to Keon, Keon's gonna be the guy that gets the first crack at starting. He said in his interviews, he said he's ready to play any role. I'm sure a guy like him who hasn't even been on a full NBA contract for a full year, like, he's not ready to take anything for granted. He's still the guy that's, gonna say, like, I'll do anything to help the team. But I think this team's gonna be at its best if Keon Ellis is, in that starting spot and if he's playing well. Some other things that Mike Brown and Monte McNair said. Mike Brown said that Luke Laux and Doug Christie are co-number twos now, taking over for Jordy, and Luke Laux has taken over Jordy Fernandez's defensive role in the coaching staff. Monte McNair, he talked about wanting the team to play with a lot of offensive pace, not pace in general, but offensive pace, because he wants to obviously slow other teams down on the defensive end. He also talked about how he wants the team to be in a spot where all five guys on the court can make a play. And I think that's really important because the NBA really has gone away from guys who are one dimensional and guys who can't go out there and make a play. I think that's going to be especially important for Keon Ellis to continue kind of developing his playmaking that we saw from last season. Kevin Huerter has got to be back to, year one Sacramento King Kevin Huerter in that regards. I just think he was pretty poor inside the arc. I mean, he wasn't the best behind the arc last season, but he probably was even worse inside the arc. And so he maybe needs to be less reliant on the three-point shot. And then the big news from Monte McNair is that he does have some new vests that he's going to be wearing and that he's going to be showcasing at some upcoming games. So big news there. I think for everyone, for most players, they kind of emphasized how DeMar DeRozan will make life easier for them, because obviously DeMar was the big topic. Everyone getting asked about how he's going to affect the team. And I think everyone was kind of had the same sentiment of, the team isn't going to have to change that much for DeMar. And DeMar is going to do whatever the team needs, but he's just going to make it easier for everyone else and get everyone else easier shots. And so that was kind of the big theme, is how many weapons the Kings have. And DeMar talked about how to be a top team, you just need all the talent you can really get. And so that kind of goes hand in hand with what Monte McNair said about all 5 guys being able to make a play. And I think the Kings roster has just constantly added more talent offensively. And that's been needed, because the first season with this core, the offense was great. But last season you saw the flaws of needing more talent offensively, needing more guys that can go and make a play. And so I think that's what the Kings are building, and they're building with versatile guys that can play on both ends. One thing that I loved about what DeMar talked about is he talked about his relationship with Keegan Murray and what that's going to be like, and he just seemed so excited to be Keegan's vet. And that's something that has kind of been said about DeMar, is that he always takes the younger players under his wing. And so for him to be the vet for Keegan, I think that's going to be a great thing. And DeMar talked about seeing himself in Keegan a little bit, like being quieter when you first come into the league and trying to, make him uncomfortable and get him out of his shell. And Sabonis, when asked like what could Keegan do better this season, Sabonis's answer was Keegan could talk more and say hi to me in the morning. And so I think that's going to be fun to see that relationship form between DeMar and Keegan, because Keegan talked about what he had been working on this summer. He talked about scoring inside, finishing around the rim, working on his post moves, more of what he did in college. And I think that's something that DeMar can definitely help with, because coming into the NBA, Keegan has just been mainly a three-point shooter, which is not what he did in college. And so if you look at the college tape, like, he's got those post moves. There's something there. And so we'll see if he can show that part of his game at all. But also the big priority for Keegan, another big priority for Keegan this summer, was the ability to guard bigger players. So he said, he's bulking up while still trying to, maintain the fitness needed to be able to play a whole bunch of minutes. But he said Mike Brown told him he was going to be guarding bigger players, which makes sense, because while yes, we could stick him on Steph and Donovan Mitchell and the guards that he did well against last season, it's like we also have other guys for that. We have Fox, we have Keon Ellis, we have Jordan McLaughlin now. So we need him to be able to guard the bigger wings. So he said at Team USA camp, that was something that he really tried to work on. He also said he tried to work out with like a whole bunch of different guys this summer to kind of get different looks. I think that's important, because what we saw before is like he worked out against Fox, and so he got really good at guarding players like Fox, the faster, smaller guards. But now he needs to be able to guard the bigger players, because that's just the need for the Kings this season. And then the last thing that Keegan talked about was just wanting to get to the foul line more, which is, again, DeMar DeRozan. That's his specialty. I mean, I can't stress enough how great I think DeMar DeRozan is going to be for Keegan's development. I think everything that Keegan needs to work on, DeMar is the guy to help him out with that. De'Aaron talked about what DeMar was going to add, and he talked about how both himself and DeMar kind of attract the other team's best wing defender. And so they're going to take the pressure off each other. He really emphasized DeRozan's playmaking and talked about how DeMar and him were already talking about, how DeMar wants Fox to move when DeMar has the ball, and he's attracting pressure and he's attracting double teams. So they've already been talking that out. We know Sabonis and DeRozan have already been working out. Everyone's already seems to be bonding with DeRozan. And then Fox just said he was working on his free throws, which we already knew what he was going to do. He wants to get his percentages back up from inside the arc, and then he wants to take more catch and shoot threes and less off the bounce threes. And that's something that DeMar will help with. And that's exactly what he needs to do. He shot a great percentage on catch and shoot threes last season. And I mean, he was fine off the bounce as well, but just more off the catch that's going to raise those percentages. It's going to make him more efficient. Sabonis talked about how DeMar's leadership can help the team not take any nights off. Because DeMar, he talked about not taking everything for granted at his age, being able to compete at this level. And so Sabonis was talking about how that leadership is going to help the Kings not lose to the lower end teams in the league as much and be able to stay focused every single night. Sabonis also said every season he just wants to up his three-point shooting a bit more, both in terms of efficiency and volume. Maybe not so much efficiency this season because he was already pretty efficient last season, but just a little bit more volume. He said he hopes the officiating stays the same. That's something that a few guys talked about, how they hoped the officiating from the end of last season continued to allow physicality because they think it helped, which I think that's exactly right. The Kings always played a physical brand of defense, and just towards the end of last season, they were rewarded for that. And then he joked about how it's up to Fox and DeRozan to battle it out in the fourth quarter for who gets that shot. But I think kind of the takeaway from how everyone was talking, especially about DeRozan, is just everyone's excited. And Mike Brown mentioned how DeMar is just bringing belief to the team. And that's one of the most excited or important things that he's bringing. And he's not just bringing it to the team, he's bringing it to the city. And so that's something, Mike Brown emphasized. And it was just good vibes at this media day. Everyone felt excited. Everyone felt happy. And, you can't say the same for some other teams' media days. So you don't want to take that for granted. Just following along on social media, it's like, you think Bulls fans are feeling this way? No, absolutely not. I feel bad for them. They got their GM talking about hosting home playoff games. Like, yeah, right. One of the guys that seemed very happy was Malik Monk. I mean, he just couldn't stop smiling, but he's funny as always. And he was just talking about how, he's felt at home in Sacramento, but now that he's got that long-term deal, he was just enjoying it this summer and kind of reflecting on the struggles that it took to get here and being able to let those go. And just having a guy like Malik, who obviously loves being here so much, he just brings an amazing vibe to the team and to the city. And it was only positive vibes from him. We got some updates on like the injured players, from Trey Lyles himself. He said his groin injury happened a couple weeks ago in a pickup game, but he's not, too worried about it. I had forgotten that he had played 2 seasons with DeMar in San Antonio because he mentioned that, and he mentioned buying DeMar's book off Amazon and wanting to get that signed for his, he's got his book club, so we know he's big into books. But yeah, nothing seems too bad with Trey Lyles. Kevin Huerter said it's going to be 6 months from his injury on October 3rd, and 6 months was the original timeline. And he said he started pretty much a regular off season in early June, but he just hasn't been able to play 5-on-5. He hasn't been able to play against anyone and through any contact. But other than that, it's been a pretty normal off season for him. So he's getting reevaluated in mid-October and said he feels good shooting the ball with his shoulder. So that's good. And then Jordan McLaughlin said it's been a week since his injury and said he was kind of surprised at, how good he felt since his ankle sprain. And he talked about just being a pest on defense, trying to speed up opponents. And then he talked about how he's kind of going to have the same role here as he had in Minnesota, but maybe there's a little more offensive opportunity for him. He shot really well from 3 last season, said it was just about the reps that he got. And so I'm excited to see what he can bring on the offensive end, because I think he's a reliable player on that end, which is something that the Kings have kind of needed at times from a guard, another guard outside of the obvious ones that already contribute. And then some of the other guys, we had Terry Taylor talking about being a junkyard dog and just knocking down open shots, being able to switch 1 through 5. He said he's really been working on a jump shot and is ready to showcase that jump shot. Because when we're talking about wanting all 5 players on the court to be able to make a play, like he needs to be able to make that jump shot, which isn't something he's necessarily done throughout his career. But he seemed pretty confident. He seemed like he wanted to get out there. So that's good to see. And another guy that seemed very, very confident was Mason Jones, because he couldn't stop talking about how, he's motivated, and he couldn't stop talking about his discipline. And he said his hair color always represents something within him. And so right now it's just black, and that's just his discipline, and that he's ready to go. We know about him losing all that weight this summer and towards the end of last season, and he's just focused on getting that roster spot. And I think that is a possibility for him. I think there is room for him to possibly make the roster. And he said the vibe around the team was just that everyone was together, everyone's connected, and just seems very excited. This media day, like Mason Jones said, it was just good vibes. Just being able to see the pictures with, like Fox, Sabonis, DeMar, Monk, Keegan all together is really exciting. And just everyone in such a positive mood, because, you look at Toronto, you look at Jakob Pertl. I saw a clip of him talking about how it's not realistic to expect the championship. We're not going to try to win games because we want to prioritize development. It's like, yeah, that's not great vibes from a veteran over there. And so I'm just so excited heading into this season. You got Keegan flipping off Mike Brown after Mike Brown took the camera and was trying to take pictures of him. Devin Carter was just in there, it seemed like trolling everyone, posting it on his Instagram story. So I love this team. It's just good vibes. I'm sure we'll see, a little bit inside of training camp, but I'm just really excited for the first preseason game. It just really feels like basketball season now, so I'm so excited. That is it for this episode of the Roll Report. You know what to do. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. Help me out. It's all free. If you want to help me out for something that's not free, you can become a member. Shout out to Joe Mama. Shout out to Cody Willis, as always, for being members. Within the next week or so, I should be coming out with another video talking about one stat per player that's going to kind of define the season. And one stat other than 3-point percentage, because I feel like for so many role players, you could just say 3-point percentage. But I'm not doing that. So keep a lookout for that, and I will see you guys later. Peace.